Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. I'm your host, Juliana. Before the episode, I have got to share one of my absolute favorite ride essentials, the Cyc Plus Smart Pump. This little thing goes everywhere with me. It's compact, powerful, and honestly a game changer on the bike. I love using it mid-ride when switching between terrains. I can drop the pressure for gravel and then pump it back up when I hit the road. Super easy, super fast. And of course, it's a total lifesaver in case of a flat or any loss of air. No stress, no hand pumping. Just press the button and go. You can grab yours with 10% off using my code ZONE2SPEAK. Link and details are in the episode notes. Trust me, once you try it, you won't leave for a ride without it. Cyc Plus Smart Pump. Smart, simple, and ready for any adventure. Now, let's hear it for the episode. All right, welcome back to Zone to Speak. Today's guest is Taylor Nichols, who just rode more than 4,000 miles across the United States, from San Francisco to East Lansing, Michigan. But this isn't a race. There are no podiums, no fast at no time. At the end of this ride is someone very special, his 101-year-old father. Along the way, Taylor is camping, meeting strangers who become friends, inviting anyone to join him for a few miles, and experiencing the US at the speed of a bike. Traveling on a bike, you notice things you would normally drive past. You depend on kindness, you solve problems one at a time, and you discover that the journey is often about far more than the miles. Today, we are talking about family, aging, community, and what really means to cross a country one campsite at a time. Welcome to Zone to Speak, Taylor.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Juliana. Your English is excellent, by the way, and what a nice intro.
Thank you. I spent a good amount of time in the US. It's been a big part of my life, but today's about you. Most people don't wake up one morning and decide, hey, I'm going to ride 4,000 miles across the US. Right. Why this ride and why now?
Well, that's a great question. Why this ride? I'll start with that. My daughters live in San Francisco. I live in Los Angeles, and I'm an actor by trade. And I'm also a big biker. I have a podcast and a radio show called Bike Talk. And I used to do a little bit of racing like you, but I was never any good. I was a little bit too chubby to be a good racer.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. But I've always been a biker, and I've always liked to use the bike as a tool, not just as a toy. And May and June are good months for actors to kind of get out of town because the work slows down often.
Okay.
And I have done a few bike trips, 4 or 5 days at a time, maybe 6, 7 days, but never anything long. And I really had the desire to do a long bike ride from point A to point B, not just a circle or a loop. And I had a real desire to spend some time in the north part of the United States, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota. And so I didn't wake up one morning and decide to do it. I thought about it for a long time. And I kind of kept thinking, I'll do it someday. And then I said, I just better do it. I have a friend who's he's actually my co-host and partner on Bike Talk, and his uncle is in an assisted living house here in Los Angeles. And Nick, my partner, asked me to go over to the assisted living place and help him one day. And I did. And I ended up having to feed him with a spoon, which was totally fine. But it really struck me of like, if I don't do something like this now, there's going to be a time where someone's going to feed me with a spoon and I won't be able to do it. So I decided that I would do it and I would just plan for it. And, I had most of the equipment. I have a Surly midnight special bike. It's a steel bike. It's kind of a gravel road bike
Nice.
and fits well with, camping equipment, panniers and all that stuff. And so then I had to think about where I wanted to go. Well, I mentioned that I wanted to go to the American Northwest, and my daughters live in San Francisco, and my dad, who you said is 101, lives in the house I grew up in Michigan. So I decided to ride from my daughters to my dad as a way of connecting the generations. I
How
was pretty
cool.
involved with the raising of my daughters, and my father was involved with raising me. And so I wanted to connect the two.
Amazing. I love that. What a nice inspiration. At the end of this journey is someone who has lived through more than a century. Tell us about your dad. What does it mean to be riding across the country to see him?
Oh, that's great. My dad is really special. He said something when he just turned 100. He's almost 102. He said, the only people who really want to live to 100 are the people who are 99, which I thought was kind of funny. But more importantly, I've learned a lesson from him, which is, you don't get to pick when you're born, and or maybe Buddhists say you do, but you also don't get to pick when you die. And I don't think my dad ever really thought like I want to live to 101 or anything like that. He's just alive. And so his philosophy is I should keep living. And he does. He's very involved. He retired from a career in public health. He was the director of the Red Cross for the Great Lakes region in Michigan. And then he went back to work working for a museum. And when he left working for the museum, he stayed busy raising money for Lansing Hospice, for hospice care for people. And he raised a lot of money for a school in Sudan so that children could go to school. And he's just been very involved in helping others. And I think that's what keeps him alive. He still drives, he still plays golf, he still goes to the theater,
Wow.
he still is living life. He slowed down definitely, and he takes naps, off and on throughout the day. But he is mobile and he is living his life. And that is also what I wanted to be a part of. When I told him that I was going to do this, he thought like, what, are you crazy? And then he really got involved with my trip and kind of followed me along as I went from small town to small town, across North Dakota and Montana and all that. So it was really special riding into the driveway and seeing him sitting there in the little folding chair waiting for me. So that was really nice.
Yeah, what an incredible man. Wow, what a noble life. And what an attitude, to keep on living and to be 101 and independent and mobile. That's really incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I actually wrote a question that I was going to ask later on, but you touched on it, which is what was the feeling when you got to the driveway and saw him? If you can describe in words.
Well, again, he lives in the house I grew up in. And when I was a kid, I had a paper route. And so the neighborhood around my dad's house was my paper route. And when I, got in on my bike into East Lansing, where he lives, I rode the route of my paper route as I came home. And so when I rode in the driveway, I felt a little bit like I was returning from, doing my paper route and just kind of gliding into the driveway. And then to see him sitting there, he had his phone out and he was taking a picture of me as I came in. And I was taking a picture of him as I came in. And it was just a really wonderful, father son moment. I think he was real tickled and real pleased. And, I rode almost 4,000 miles. And, you said earlier that bikes are such a great way to travel because they really do move at the speed of observation. You're not
Yeah.
too fast. You see all the historical markers. You see all the little towns, all the people. And so it was just really special to end it with, seeing him sitting there in the drive.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you're saying, like when we travel by car, by plane, places can become a blur, right? On a
Right.
bike, every mile matters. What have you noticed about the US that most people never get to experience?
People. And again, I lived in New York like you for a long time, and then I've lived in Los Angeles, since I lived in New York. So I've been on both coasts, and you really, people often say the flyover states, the states in the middle of the country. And when you're on a bike, you can't help but see them and spend time with them and talk to them and rely on them for information and for help. It was funny when I was in North Dakota and I told people that I was from Los Angeles, they would say, "Oh my God, Los Angeles, it's so dangerous. Do you have a gun? Are you safe? All those homeless people."
Wow.
And then when I told my friends in Los Angeles that I was riding through North Dakota, they went, "Oh my God, is it safe? Do you have a gun? Has anyone pulled a gun on you? Are you scared?"
Wow.
And, nothing could be further from the truth. And I feel very safe in Los Angeles, and I was very safe and taken care and taken well and taken care of well when I was riding through Montana and North Dakota. So the people were very inquisitive, open, friendly. One woman picked me up in a rainstorm and drove me 50 miles out of her way, and then turned around and drove back. And I was kind of stuck. I needed some help that day, and 50 miles is that's an hour drive. And she
Yeah.
took me long out of her way, which was really kind. And that has stayed with me, that those are the kind of people that you meet on a trip like this.
Yeah, yeah. It's very touching, and I think it gives us hope, in the world where we
Perfect
live,
word.
that we just read or scroll just bad news. And it's when you are on a bike, and even when I'm doing an ultra or an adventure, that it's I have never done 4,000 miles, which is about, for anyone that don't know the conversion, it's a little bit over 6,000 kilometers. Even just doing 500 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers, you do encounter a lot of kindness. It's
Yeah, yeah,
such a good feeling.
yeah. There were times when people in cars weren't so kind, when they buzzed me or came really close to me, especially in
Yeah,
trucks. And that was a drag. But
that's a
most
shame.
of my route was on small roads, on small roads that weren't very used. And then people were much more respectful and gave me room and things like that. But you're totally right. It gives you hope.
Mhm. Yes, yes. So you were talking about your route. So I'm going to skip to logistics. So 4,000 miles, 6,400 kilometers, give and take, sounds like a very, well, not sounds. It is a very big, big, big ride. How much planning actually went into this trip, and how did you decide on your route?
Um, Probably not as much planning as I should have, but I also didn't want to overplan it. I wanted to have an outline and then be free to improvise a little bit on the ride. Um, there's an organization called Adventure Cycling, which is really a great organization. They started in 1976 at the bicentennial with not the very first, but with the very first sort of planned ride across the US from Washington State to Washington, D.C. And this organization has maps of all different
I heard
routes
about that.
around the US. It's really great. They have a great
Really
they
cool.
have a great website with interactive maps. And so I went on that website
Nice.
and I looked at the areas that I wanted to go and picked different routes. And I mean, I could show you the maps. They're really wonderful. They list mileage and campsites and water and towns, coffee shops, bike stores. They also give you some information. This road's crowded. Be careful. Go early in the morning when there's not a lot of traffic. Make sure you have lights. Or they say, there's a bike trail here. You can ride on this trail and be completely free of traffic. And so I kind of cobbled together a bunch of different routes from adventure cycling, leaving San Francisco, going along the coast up through Northern California into Oregon. And then once I got to Florence, Oregon, turning east and going across Oregon and then up through Idaho along the Snake River. And I used parts of different routes and kind of cobbled them together. So I knew what my overall route was, but day to day, I just kind of played it by ear. It's a beautiful day. It's light late. I can do 80, 100 miles. It's raining. It's cold. It's hot. It's hilly. It's windy. I'll do 60 miles or 50 miles. So I just kind of played it by ear. And because I was camping, I had the freedom to do that. I did stay in hotels, but every third or fourth night, just, to charge up my lights and my phone and to take a shower maybe and do some laundry. But I swam in a lot of rivers and in a lot of lakes. And that was really fun. There was one day I was in Idaho, and I was on a little gravel trail. And, from riding on gravel, it's just not as fast. And it was kind of loose gravel. And I'm carrying 35, 40 pounds of gear. And I was probably going 5 miles an hour, and it was uphill and
Wow.
it was hot. And I just was in, like, I'm never going to make it, going 5 miles an hour. And instead of pushing on, I just stopped and got naked and jumped in this little stream. I couldn't really even jump in. I had to kind of, walk through the rocks and get in. But I lay down in the running water and just spent like 10, 15 minutes, sitting on the hot rock and jumping in and out of the water. And then I got back on the bike and I felt better and I made my day.
Yeah, I'm sure that re-energized you.
Yeah. And those are things that you can't always plan on, So if you're too planned out, then I think you miss the moment to moment excitement of being in someplace new, stopping for a coffee or stopping for a beer or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. I love a little bit of the surprise effect. I agree that, over plan. I mean, it's good to be prepared, but I also like to, be a little bit spontaneous and be surprised. Right. That's really nice. I love this app. I wonder why nobody did something similar in Europe, because that's really amazing. People would pay for it. I would.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because adventure cycling has struggled financially because it does take resources to map out these routes. Yeah. Someone has to ride them and, see if the roads are good or see if the surface of the road is good or if there's a lot of traffic. And then they have to go back and adventure cycling has paper maps, but also digital maps. And digital maps, of course, are updated much more often. And then you can have them on your phone. And so it'll actually give you turn by turn directions, and sometimes that's really handy because you're not sure, which way do I go? And the last thing you want to do is go 10 miles out of your way. So it's helpful. Yeah.
So you spent a few weeks riding, right? How long did it take you?
53 days riding. Yeah. And I averaged probably 66 miles a day was my average. I did 5.
That's about 100 kilometers, 80.
Yeah, about 100K a day. And believe me, I wish it was kilometers because kilometers go by a lot faster than miles.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about your daily routine from waking up to finding somewhere to sleep.
Right. Well, I'll start at night because I rode a lot in the evening. That was really a nice time to ride. And May and June are longer days. And in that part of the U.S., it stays light very late. It stays light till 9:30 or 10 at night, and really not even dark until 10:30 or so. So I rode often until 8:30 or 9 at night. And that was really a special time on the road. The light was great. There was a little less traffic. There was less wind. I was usually in a good mood. I really enjoyed it. Was cooler. I really enjoyed that. So I often got to where I wanted to get, the little town or the campground or the campsite, kind of late. And that pressured me a little bit to find where I wanted to set up my tent and to set it up and to get everything ready for when it was dark. And I ate often in the dark, which is not the best. It's kind of more fun to eat when you can see comfortably and all that. Uh,
Yes.
but I didn't cook. I mean, I either bought packaged food like a sandwich someplace and I had that for dinner, or I made real simple food, ramen noodles, beef stew, stuff like that. And so I would eat then. And then when I got in my tent, I was exhausted. So usually by like 11 o'clock, I was in my tent, 11 p.m., and I was asleep by 11:05. And I did really well. I slept until, 6 or 7 in the morning almost every day. And depending on the weather in the morning, I would stay in bed for a little while. It was kind of cozy in my tent. And especially if it was raining. There were a few mornings when it was raining, and I just stayed in my tent until it stopped raining.
Yeah.
And so then in the morning, I'd make coffee and oatmeal. I had that every morning. And I tried to buy fruit where I could. And so I had some fruit for the morning. And that's usually when I took my time. I wrote in my journal in the morning. I looked at my route that I wanted to do that day in the morning if I had internet connection. And then, of course, I would wait for my tent to dry, because even if it didn't rain, there was enough dew that the tent was wet most mornings. So I didn't roll out of the campground until 9:30. A couple of times I left early. One morning, a woman woke me up shaking my tent and saying, "Hey, you can't be here. You have to get out of here." And I'm like, it was like 7 in the morning. I'm like, what? And I was, fast
Wow.
asleep. And apparently I had camped in a private campground, not a public campground, but it was clearly a
Okay.
campground. There were some RVs a ways away. And
Yeah. How would you know?
I didn't
Especially
know. There was,
arriving late.
there
Yeah.
was no one there when I got there. And she was kind of, abrupt, and, she was kind of pretending to be angry, like I had really broken a law or something. And so that morning I just got up, packed up, and split, and rode to the
Yeah.
nearest town, which was maybe 10 or 15 miles away, and had
That's
breakfast
a
and
good
coffee in that
decision.
town. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I thought she was plain angry more than she really was angry. Like, I was really taking advantage of her,
Just to
and
get you out of there or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, out
yeah.
of all those miles, just this one incident, I guess that's not a bad thing.
No, no, and really that was almost the only one, except for a few cars that buzzed me, and I think they kind of did it on purpose, like this cyclist, fuck him, and
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. It's so sad. I don't get it why people get so upset at cyclists. I know some cyclists are also not a good example, but that's more in the city, like
yeah,
people cutting corners and things like that. But if you see like someone doing cycle tourism or an adventure, and come on, cut them a break.
yeah, yeah, totally. I
Share
don't
the
get it
road.
either. Someone said that cyclists on tours are rolling wallets, that they roll through town and spend money. And, sure
Exactly.
enough, even though I was camping, I still spent a fair amount of money and
Yeah.
of course I stayed in hotels sometimes, but I bought a lot of food at grocery stores. I bought a lot of food at little markets. I bought a lot of snacks, ice cream. I bought a lot of beer. I had a beer almost every night. And
I
so
see it here in Girona. Like the cyclist comes through town, they are shopping, they are eating, they are staying, while tourists that come for the day, like on the tour bus, they
right.
just walk through and get out. They're not
And yeah,
doing
yeah.
anything else. Maybe a bottle of water.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's happened a lot in Barcelona with the uh,
Yeah. The
boats.
protests against tourists. Yeah.
Yeah, they're what are the boats called? The big tour boats. The people get
Oh.
off the boat, they walk up to
Oh, yeah,
Las
yeah,
Ramblas,
yeah.
they walk back to the boat, and they split. And they never, all they do is just cause problems,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
don't really
Yep.
spend a
That
lot of money
happens.
because they sleep and eat on the boat.
Yeah. So be kind to cyclists. We spend
Yes.
money in your town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Girona still the hub for a lot of foreign bike racers? Lance Armstrong used to live there and all of that.
Yeah, yeah, Lance. I don't know if Hincapi lived here. I think so because there is even a loop that it's called Hincapi Loop.
Oh,
But yeah, a lot of the pro cyclists live here. Most of the world tour teams, a lot of them live here. A lot of the ladies on the Tour de Femmes also live here. There's also a lot of pro triathletes living here. It's just a great place for, there's endless routes,
right,
gravel, tarmac, and it's great weather most of the year. So
right.
it's
And I
easy.
would add great coffee and great beer because the little, city across the river is, the old part of the city is so beautiful.
Yes, Barrivel. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was thinking about your daughters. Were they worried? Were they thinking you were crazy to do this, or they were super
It's really
excited?
funny. Kids are so funny. Again, I'm an actor, and I'm really proud of this TV show or this movie or something like that. And they could care less. They don't watch the shows. They don't
Really?
care at all. And I think the same is true with this ride. They were really nice and they were supportive. And when I left San Francisco, they met me in the morning, and they both live in the marina of San Francisco, which is kind of the north end, right there by the Golden Gate Bridge. And we left in the shadow of the Golden Gate Bridge, and we met in the shadow of the Golden Gate Bridge and had coffee on the morning that I left and took pictures and all that kind of stuff. And then I rolled off and rode across the bridge and north up through Northern California. And I think they followed the trip and were, curious. And I was posting pictures at taylornichols.bikelife on Instagram. And so there's a lot of great little pictures of, that section of America and things like that. But I don't think they were all that, they got their own lives, and they should have their own lives and not worry too much about their dad. I think they were pleased about it and had fun talking about it, but I think they're more interested in their boyfriends and, things like that.
My dad rides, and if he would do something like that, I would. I mean, I would be excited and proud, but I would definitely worry too much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, they probably worried a little bit. So I have to
Have you
give them
had any
credit.
moment? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure they just maybe didn't want to show it, so it wouldn't
Right.
discourage you. I don't know. Was there any moment during the ride that you questioned, "What am I doing?"
Yeah. Often. Um, I noticed, and I think you would understand this too, just from, being a cyclist and being a big rider. Almost every day there was one section of 20 miles or so where I just was feeling great. And I was pedaling, I was meditating, and I was in the metronome of, pedaling, and I was down in the drops, and I was, watching my speed and, just really enjoying riding my bike. But there was also one section almost every day where I was exhausted. And a couple of times I just stopped. And you know how, you play games with yourself on a long ride where you don't stop, or on a long climb, you go, well, I'll just make it to that knob or that pole or that tree or whatever. And so you get to that tree and then you keep going. And I played those games with
Yes.
myself. But a couple of
Yeah.
times I just got off the bike and, put my head down, and I was exhausted. Uh, and those were the times when I thought, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? But I set goals for myself that were attainable, and each day I met that goal. I mean, I guess there were a couple of days where I didn't make my goal, but most every other time I did. And so the next day I started fresh. I started, okay, I can do this.
New
I made
goal,
my goal.
new
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Awesome.
did question myself. I did question why I'm doing it. I was away from my wife and our dog and our home and my work and all that kind of stuff. Uh, but in the end, I'm really glad I did it.
I'm happy to hear it. I
Yeah.
can see it. I can see it. Yeah. Tell me about you were inviting strangers along, which I love. Why was that important, and have any unexpected friendship blossom out of this?
Yes, definitely. I did it partly because of Bike Talk, our radio show and podcast. And, a lot of people who listened to the show were really following the ride. And while it was difficult to let them know because of the lag in recording and airing and all that, where I was every day, there were a few cities where people came. Someone came from to San Francisco to see me off. And then in Eugene, Oregon, someone came and rode with me in Oregon. And then in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I met a lot of people because I actually stayed there for a day or two, and they were great. They showed me all around Minneapolis, and I'd never been there. And it's really a beautiful city and a very bike friendly city. And so
Nice.
they took me on group rides and solo rides, and they took me downtown, and they took me in the country and on bike paths and on roads. And they were just fans of the show who came out and really helped me. Like this one guy, Brett McGraw, rode out of his home in Minneapolis to meet me about 50 miles out of town and rode in with me into town. And then he talked to his brother, who's a pilot for Delta, and asked him if I could stay in his house. So I ended up staying in his brother's house for 2 nights, which was
Wow.
really great. They really opened their home and their hearts, and made the trip really fun. I did laundry. We went out to dinner. One night we came home and drank bourbon, and it was just really fun. And it was fun to meet those people and spend a little bit of time with them.
How nice.
Yeah,
Yeah. Those moments are truly special.
yeah. And then when I got to Wisconsin, I went through this area in Wisconsin called the Elroy Sparta Trail, and they call it the oldest rail-to-trail in the country. And of course, rail-to-trails are areas where they've taken a railroad track and removed the track and now just made it into a bike path. And I rode through on these trails, and I rode up a little bit to a mountain, and then there was a tunnel in the mountain, and I rode into the tunnel on a little dirt path. It's a train tunnel, not a big car tunnel. So the tunnel's actually quite small, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees easily because I was in this pitch black tunnel, and I couldn't see the end of the tunnel. I didn't know
Oh my
how long it
goodness.
was. I didn't know how far it was. And there was water dripping down in the tunnel,
That's so
and
scary.
pitch black. And so I, had all my lights on, and I could barely see as I kind of made my way through the tunnel. And it took me about 13, 14 minutes to get all the way through the tunnel. And the first 7 or 8 minutes, I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And finally I did, and I made it out, but I was all alone. And that was really a crazy experience, really,
Yeah.
really fun. And then there were 2 more of those, not quite as long, but that's one of the fun things about riding on rails to trails is you really see a different part of the town. And of course, unlike airports or highways, rail to trails routes go right into the middle of these little towns. And so you're riding
Yeah.
through the forest, and then all of a sudden you ride into this little teeny town, and you can go shopping or get a coffee or a Coke or a beer and get back on the trail and ride some more. So it was really an experience, really, really fun to do.
Nice. I would be afraid of that tunnel, not knowing how long
Well, I
it
was a
takes
little
to get
bit, yeah,
out.
yeah. I was a little bit freaked out, yeah.
But I
Partly
love
because
when
I
cities.
hadn't seen anybody, Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. No, no,
I
no.
hadn't
Go,
seen
go, go.
anybody on the trail riding up to the tunnel, and then you get there and you go, "Oh my God, what do I do?" And so,
Yeah. 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 I love when cities do that planning when, railroads that are not used anymore are turning to cycling paths. There are a lot of them here in Spain. They're called Via Verdes, and it's so nice. And a lot of them also don't do. I have a lot of climbing because trains are not really going
right,
up.
right.
So they're nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't know that they had them in Spain.
Yeah, Via
Villa Verde.
Verde.
Yeah.
Yeah. When
Like
you come to
Greenway. Right.
Girona, I'll show you.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't
Yeah.
wait.
A lot of bikepackers become experts at deciding what matters to pack. What is one of the items you couldn't imagine doing this ride without? And what is something you pack that you will probably never bring again?
Well, the thing I'll never bring again is a poncho. I had
Okay.
a poncho for the rain, and I got caught in the rain a couple of times. And I guess if I was riding in cold weather in the rain, I might use the poncho. But in warm weather in the rain, I learned that once it started raining, if you could get shelter, to just get shelter and wait it out. And invariably, in 15 minutes or so, the rain would either stop or slow down enough. And then one time, twice actually, I got really caught in the rain while riding and I got soaked. And I just don't think a poncho is going to keep you dry when it's raining that hard. And so
Yeah.
once you're wet, you're wet. And when you're cycling, your body is a little engine. And once it stops raining, my clothes dried, like that. And
Yeah.
so I would not bring a poncho again. And what I couldn't do without, well, it's so funny because there's camping gear I wouldn't do without, and there's cooking gear and sleeping gear that I wouldn't do without. I wore a cashmere sweater almost all the time, and that's
Wow.
what
That's
I
very
would.
fancy.
Yeah, I looked really good. I got to tell you. But seriously, I wore a light cashmere sweater 80% of the time. I tried to do this thing called constant exposure, where I wasn't changing my layers all the time. Like the minute I got hot, I didn't drop a layer, or the minute I got cold, I didn't add a layer. I just kept on a shirt underneath this cashmere sweater, and I wore that when it was sprinkling, because the wool would wick the water away and dry quickly. I wore it when I was sweating, again because the wool would wick the water, and I slept in it. So it was just great. I would highly recommend merino wool or a cashmere wool
The best. I
sweater.
love merino.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
it kept me cool in the heat and it kept me warm when it was chilly. I
Yes.
slept in it. I looked good, when I walked into a bar or a restaurant or a coffee shop or a market. I didn't look like a scumbag. And
Yeah.
I'm teasing, of course, but it was true. I mean, I looked presentable. I didn't look dirty and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I'm backpacking, I also try to find, I have some cycling gear that it's very like multi-purpose. You can be on the bike, but you can also go out and have, something to eat,
right.
that you are not like all in jersey, tight, clothing. Um, yeah. Well,
It was
I
it,
want pictures of that.
it was funny. One night I was in Montana and I wasn't sure where I was going to stay, and it was getting dark. And I wasn't sure if there was going to be a market open in this next little town that I was trying to get to. I had food on me. I always carried a day or two's worth of food so that if I did get stuck, I could still eat. But it was, just ramen noodles or something like that. And I got to this little town and, the market was closed. I was like, God dang, I wanted a beer and, maybe something else to eat besides my noodles, and the market had already closed. And then I looked across the little courtyard of this little town. And when I say little town, I mean, population 79. The restaurant said open 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I thought, God, the restaurant's closed. But then I noticed there were people in the restaurant. So I walked my bike over there and kind of leaned it up against the outside of the restaurant. And sure enough, there were 25 people in the restaurant. And, this is a town where 25
Half of
people
the
is
town.
half the town. Right. And so I opened the door to go in and people kind of looked at me. And, this is when that wool sweater comes in handy because I didn't, I didn't look like, dirty or something. And the woman said, "Do you have a reservation?" And I said, "Oh no, I don't." And she said, "Oh well, we only do reservations because they don't know how many people they're going to get, so they cook toward how many people have made a reservation for that night, and they're only open one night during the week." And but then the other woman who was cooking said, "I think we have enough food." So I went from thinking I have no food, there's nothing to drink, I don't know what I'm going to do, to sitting down at the bar at this really nice little restaurant, having a glass of wine and steak. And it just could not have been nicer and more of a surprise. And I think that goes back to what we were talking earlier about this improv on a trip like this. You just kind of go with the flow. And sometimes it turns out you have a steak dinner and a glass of wine. And
Yeah.
sometimes you sleep in the cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of surprises, what has surprised you the most during this trip about the country, about yourself?
Well, I think what surprised me most about the country is the people. That invariably people were open and kind and considerate. Not everybody. I mean, not everybody was like, "Oh, where are you from? Where are you biking?" or all that kind of stuff. But even the ones who weren't really curious were polite and friendly and helpful if I asked them a question. So I think without a doubt, the biggest surprise was the American people, or I can imagine any people that you're traveling through, uh, whatever country it might be. For me, it was the U.S. Are good people, are helpful, kind, considerate uh, people, and that was really nice to kind of be reminded of that. And the biggest surprise for myself was that I didn't get lonely. I was very comfortable being by myself. I didn't get scared at nighttime. Not maybe scared's not the right word, but sometimes I camped in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't know if there would be animals or people or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was
Bears.
very comfortable. Totally, I was very comfortable traveling by myself. And I think that was kind of a surprise.
Yeah, that's good. I think when we do those type of adventures and we are by ourselves for a long time, it gives us a lot of perspective.
Yeah.
Do you think this ride has changed you, or change what you think it's actually important?
Oh, that's a great question. I do think it has. Although it's so easy to slip back into your old habits when you get back into your regular life. And I've said this to other people. I don't think I had a negative thought about me the whole trip. I mean, I may have had negative thoughts about how far it was or something like that, but I didn't feel bad about me. Like I'm, not important, or I'm a loser, or I'm not very good, or, whatever self-doubt one might have. And I think
Yeah.
partly just the fact that I'm an actor, I have a lot of that, a lot of self-doubt. And I didn't have any moments of negative thoughts creeping in and taking over my mental space. I was focused on achieving my goal, and I was proud that I was able to do it and strong enough. And so I think that's the biggest change, that I didn't allow negative thoughts to hijack my feelings and emotions.
That's a very good reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not that easy sometimes to apply on the day to day, but hopefully you are aware now and then maybe little by little can do a shift for
Yeah,
you.
I think so. And if you ask me how I would do that, I think I would say setting achievable goals day to day. Maybe even, a goal in the morning, a goal at lunch, and a goal in the evening, or a goal for this week. But just setting
Yeah.
achievable
Yeah.
goals I think, helped keep me in a positive space.
Yeah. 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 I never thought about that, but it's so true. I completely relate because when I'm on an adventure on the bike, I also don't have those negative talks with myself,
Right,
like,
right,
yeah, it's just more about, yeah, there is obviously negativity of I'm tired, when is this day gonna end?
right, right,
But that's so small, close to all the mental clarity and the positivity and the beauty that we see not just in nature but in the world, like said,
right,
the people that come across the way. Yeah.
right. I spend a lot of time with myself on the bike, and in Montana and North Dakota, there were often long stretches where I didn't see anybody, where a car didn't pass me for 8 or 10 minutes. And to keep my mind active, I did talk to myself, and I did kind of, think, how would I handle this situation if I had it again, or how would I deal with that person who treated me wrong or whatever. So it wasn't that difficult thoughts didn't come into my head, because I think that's one of the good things about riding a bike is you solve those issues when you're riding the bike.
Yeah.
You think you were mistreated by a, a boss or a colleague or a lover or whatever. And so you ride the bike and you kind of play it through in your head, and that's when I problem solve, when I'm on the bike, when I'm,
Yeah.
some people meditate. I think my meditation comes in the circular motion of the pedal and riding the
Yeah.
bike.
Yeah. Yeah, the bike really is a wonderful tool, not just physically but
Right.
mentally. Yeah.
But mentally, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I just have now some fire chat questions.
Sure. Great.
Best meal you had?
Oh, no, no question. The steak dinner with the red wine
Thought you
in
would say that.
Ovando, right?
Worst weather?
One night riding into Portage, Wisconsin. Again, I was riding in the evening, and I was pushing it. I had 15 more miles to go, and it was starting to get a little dark, and uh, it was starting to sprinkle. And then it didn't sprinkle; it poured, and so I rode 15 miles in the dark, really. Or partly because of the clouds and the rain and the wind and the lightning, but I had to do it
Wow.
because there was no place to stay. And
Wow.
it was raining so hard I couldn't see my map on my phone. Even I had to put my phone away, and so I just kind of was, the blind leading the blind, trying to get into this little town. And the little town was small; it wasn't a big town, but I was able to get a hotel in that town, and
Good.
dry off and take a shower and all that kind of stuff. But without a doubt, that was the hardest ride, and it was a little bit, I don't want to say scary, but a little bit uncomfortable, because I couldn't see very far because of the wind and the rain and the lightning, and the fact that it was getting dark. Uh,
Yeah,
but I made it through it, and
you
that in
did.
itself was kind of a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Overcoming those obstacles definitely,
Right,
it's like leveling up.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Best campsite?
Wow. Best campsite. I think on the last night I camped right near Lake Michigan. And I got there again kind of late, so I couldn't really see where I was when I set up my tent and stuff. But I was kind of alone, and I had wanted to jump in the lake, because I don't know if you know Lake Michigan, but it is a
Yes.
huge freshwater lake with a
Yeah.
hard sand bottom. And it's like being in the ocean or the
Yeah.
Mediterranean, but it's fresh
Yeah.
water. And so I wanted to swim that night, but it was dark and I was tired, so I didn't. But in the morning when I woke up, I walked down to the lake and swam in the lake and came back to my campsite and had coffee. And also, partly because I was almost done with the trip, uh, that was just a special campsite and a special night. And because I'm from Michigan, I knew Lake Michigan, so it was really nice to get in the water in the morning and kind of take my morning soak in the lake.
What a treat.
Yeah.
Most beautiful stretch of the road?
Um, I would say Oregon. There was a stretch of road that was closed off to cars over a mountain pass because they were cutting trees. And it's a scenic highway anyways, so it's a little windy and things like that. And most cars go on the interstate over the pass, but I chose the scenic route, which was, of course, smarter because of less cars. But then when I got there, the road was closed because they were cutting trees up on the pass. And, one of the great things about a bicycle is you can go right around those kinds of closures. And so I went around the closure, and I'm guessing 40, 45 miles, both
Wow.
up and down. It was this beautiful scenic highway with not a car on it. And the
Nice.
downhill was even better, because, even on the downhill, you worry about cars coming the other way or cars that want to pass you, even though you're going 40 miles an hour. But there were just no cars on the road. And so it was really a special day. And there was a lava field at the top where there had been a volcano. And that was really fun to ride through. And so that was a special route, definitely.
Nice. Music / podcast or silence?
Silence, definitely. I did listen to music sometimes, but not very often. And I did listen to a book. I listened to All the Colors of the Dark, kind of mystery novel. And I liked that. But for 53 days, basically 10 hours a day, that's a long time on the bike. And so I opted for silence most of the time, but I did listen to music and the book and some podcasts, although I really enjoyed not listening to any news podcasts, the Daily from the New York Times or something like that. I sort of enjoyed being separated from, Trump and American politics and the war in Iran.
A nice break.
Yeah, it was a nice break. And I'm sick to my heart that it's still going on. And I'm sick to my heart that he's still the president. But
Same.
we have to, bear it, a little bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's hope something changes soon.
Yeah. I mean, it's just as ridiculous. I think the war in Iran is ridiculous. And I think what's going on in American politics is ridiculous. And I think him as a leader of our country is a shame. It's just too bad.
Yeah, it is. But hopefully a lot of these awful things that are surfacing needed to be surfaced. And once he's gone, it would take time, but hopefully it's a good leader that can come and fix all this.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. That's a good way to think about it. Right. Now we're both going to get
it right. I mean, gotta have hopes.
Right. Totally.
I know you said you like to take your time in the morning and have your coffee and make your oats, but I'm still going to have this question. Big breakfast or snack all day?
Can I say both? Because the only time I had a big breakfast was when I was able to find a restaurant and eat in the restaurant. And I really enjoyed that. I had eggs and pancakes and, this kind of all-American breakfast. And I really liked it. It was good. And it definitely fueled me for the day ahead. Again, I was doing, probably 70, 80 miles most days. And then, to be honest with you, I would not snack all that much. I did bring some fruit, and I would try to eat fruit during the day when I could find it and things like that. And I did have snacks on me. But I usually, and I probably waited too long. They always say, drink before you're thirsty, eat before you're hungry. And I would often not. And I would wait, and then I'd be hungry. And then I would make bad choices. I'd eat cookies or muffins or ice cream or whatever like that. But that was also
you
kind
needed
of fun.
the calories.
Yeah. So I didn't really answer your question except for saying.
Well, we said both. It's okay. You needed all the calories, so I think it's fair to have both.
Right.
Now, my last question is: what was your favorite state?
I think Oregon. It's such a beautiful state, and in Oregon they have bike shops that sell beer. So it was really fun. Oregon is kind of known for craft beers and things like that. And it's funny, when I was in Montana and North Dakota, they didn't have a lot of good beer choices. It was mostly
Oh,
Coors Light and Budweiser and Bud Light and things like that. But in
yeah.
Oregon, they had a lot of really unusual local craft beers. And I stopped in two bike stores. And I also stopped at this really cool place called the Spoken Hostel, which is a bike hostel. And it was in a little town called Mitchell, Oregon. And again, the town had 179 people. But there was this old church that this couple had turned into a hostel for bike travelers. And you would roll your bike right in and put it next to your bed. And downstairs they had laundry and a kitchen. And I
Nice.
met a lot of other bikers who were doing similar
Oh,
rides there.
oh,
But when I stopped at the bike store to either get information or to talk about fixing something on my bike or whatever, or just to stop in and say hi, they had beers. And so it was fun to get a beer at the bike store and talk with the guys in the bike store. And they
yeah.
were always interested in what I was doing and where I was going and where I was from. And so it was kind of nice to share a beer while we were doing that.
Yeah, yeah, especially being alone for so many hours, I'm sure it was
Right,
nice just to grab a drink and have a chat with
right,
some
right.
human connection.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Taylor, thank you so much for sharing your journey with me. And I hope the miles to Michigan were everything you imagined. Thanks for joining Zone to Speak, and I'll see you in Girona.
Perfect. I would love that. I love the title of your podcast because I think I was in zone two most of the time. And
Yeah,
and thank you very much for having me. It was really a pleasure to talk.
absolutely. Pleasure is mine. Thank you. And that's all for today's episode. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends.